Hey Jay, is it Sodagar?
Sodagar.
Sodagar.
No. Sodagar.
Sodagar.
So, actually, let's do it this way. Yeah.
Oh, we got somebody online.
Oh,
We're off.
yeah.
Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to What's Next. Our edition today is on stand-up comedy and what's next with all that stand-up comedy funny stuff. I'm very excited. We have our European show today, as I'm starting to call it, at 12 noon here in the States, joined by two stand-up comics over at across the pond in UK. Welcome, Robyn Perkins and Jay Sodagar. All right, I'll work on that. I got 60 minutes.
I won't call you racist. It's fine.
Well, I am from America, but later on, more to discuss. So, Robyn, you joined us as an award-winning comedian who uses science to explain her life choices. And obviously, you're in the UK now because Americans have nothing to do with science. So your comedy has probably found a better home over there. A friend wants to describe Robyn as enthusiasm over organization. I like that. That's nice. So Robyn's been honing her skills in Britain, US, Australia, and has been called exceptionally charismatic by Voice magazine. Nice. Run with that one, as you have. That's a good one.
Yeah, absolutely.
Not only fancy little sayings, but she's also had a lot of international success with this, winning the Sydney Fringe Comedy Award back in 2019, and was a weekly winner of the Comedy Award at the Perth Fringe World in 2020. Wow, they actually got it up in 2020. Right?
January.
Or was it online?
Yes. No,
January.
It was. I actually left Australia March 8th.
Wow.
Really?
Right, you just got out before times. Okay. Jay joins us. He's been doing stand-up comedy for over 25 years. Remember the first
Check these hairs out. Check these hairs out. I had black hair when I started.
Yeah.
Down there as well.
Down there as well. It's aged you. Okay, fair enough. And you've been doing that 25 years all over the world. And also you teach comedy. For the last 15 years, you've been teaching comedy and have taught over 5,000 students. That's a pretty impressive mark. Like children littered around the world.
I taught a lot of people.
Yeah, that's great. Well, that's what I got to hear. And you've been doing it all. So there's nothing you haven't done. You've been writing, acting in film, TV, radio, and your passion is live comedy. So whatever shape or form it is, here we are. So great. Sounds like two perfect people to talk to who have had some great success in the before times. And then mid-March hits. And wow, everything changes. No venues, no pubs. What's a poor comic supposed to do? And, this was the great pivot or pause or whatever word you want to throw at it. And let's hear a little bit. Let's start with you, Robyn. What was that changeover like? What was that crossover to COVID times?
It happened really suddenly. As I mentioned, I was over in Australia and actually, I was gigging in Singapore March 7th and then flew back on the way back and everything just kind of hit. I think I did 3 or 4 gigs back in the UK before everything got shut down. And I think there is a group of people that just went online really quickly, but it was, it's heartbreaking, obviously, when 100% of your income comes from performing live to all of a sudden nothing. But it's, like every industry, you when you hit crisis, research and development, and people have been changing,
Big time.
Yeah. So I started doing online gigs beginning of April.
Wow.
Which was a pretty big turnaround. Yeah. And I don't want to summarize my whole life in one sentence, but it's been okay. Financially, online gigs aren't as great as they should be. You just don't get the funding and the donations that make it as worthwhile. However, as a science comedian, I have 2 sets. I have my club set where I host a lot. I do sets. And it's more mainstream, I guess. And then I have my solo shows, which are more science comedy. And I have been starting to merge the two, which I think is something I should have done a long time ago. When I was over, I did a week at the Sydney Comedy Store, and the MC there was he just when he found out that I do science comedy, he's like, why are you not doing it on the stage? Like, I don't understand. Like, I don't give a shit if it's Friday night. And so I was actually gigging there on Valentine's Day. And I just finished an hour-long show on like the neuroscience of love. And he's like, I'm going to introduce you as a biologist just so you have to do it.
Wow.
So, but the good thing is in lockdown, it's given me an opportunity. I started like a science stand-up chat show where every week is a different topic, and I am writing, 15, 20 minutes of new material every week and doing all the research behind it. And I wouldn't have been able to do that if it wasn't for lockdown. So yeah,
that's a great summary, and you hit on a lot of other points that we'll be talking through this. No, there's a lot going on this, and I think the fact it's the pivot and like the R&D, like you're talking about, and I know you went through a lot of challenges. We'll talk about some of the tech things that all of us went through, but then also this overriding sense of we learned stuff from this that we weren't doing before, and now.
Yeah.
What does that mean? So great. All right. So you jumped on, ready to do your shows, have a talk show, and you made the pivot. Jay, what did you do? How was this all for you?
I was grief stricken. I had a year's full of income right in my diary right there. And it's as like my blank hand is right now with a few lines in it. I was grief stricken. But at the time, if you go through the little timeline of the whole thing, when lockdown was there, everyone thought, 3 weeks, we're all right, fine, 3 weeks. 3 weeks later, we're all back up again. 4.5 months later, the whole thing just literally kicked me in the balls. It hurt. And I teach comedy. I miss stand-up so much. I miss it so much. I miss the buzz of performing. I miss the whole ritual of getting to the gig and meeting all the other comics and shaking hands and everything else. I miss all of that. And to then have that overnight, bam, just taken out of your whole life. I've been doing this for a fair amount of time. Same as Robyn, but we both know each other. And you ask any comedian the addiction that they have with stand-up, and to have that taken away with you. I mean, comedians always had that question in car journeys towards gigs. So what would it be like if comedy was just made illegal and you can't perform it anymore? What would you do? Right. And we all just laughed that shit off. And now that shit came real. All right. So it was a very grief-stricken time for me. And it took me a long while to adapt to it. So when these kind of online things came along, I did a few online gigs, and it's fair to say, doing comedy for 25 years live, I'm fucking killing it. All right. I'm brilliant at it. On a Zoom call with someone scratching their ass while drinking a Budweiser and having some popcorn in their hands while half watching Game of Thrones. I'll be honest with you, it didn't work out well for me. It did. But you get better at it. Comedy develops. Your instincts as a comedian, number one, is to always to connect with the audience that you're in front of. That's the electric environment that you have as a comedian, and you feed off of that environment. And with Zoom gigs and online gigs, you don't have that immediacy, that you don't have that full connection. So your instincts as a comic heighten. You kind of learn how to read people's faces just from video screens and so on and so forth. And as much as you can't hear laughter, if people's video screens are on, you can actually hear laughter or see laughter. And people are like little chat boxes and things like that, typing in LOL and funny emojis and all this kind of stuff. It's the closest thing we're going to get. It's not the same as live comedy, but it's the closest thing we get. And yeah, I teach stand-up as well. And I think for me, the saving grace, I guess with Robyn does science as well as stand-up, so she could combine the two and have a product, have something to be able to do online. I teach stand-up, and as much as all of my gigs just disappeared, we developed and adapted the courses to be online. And it works amazingly well. I think the love that people have for stand-up is still there, and doing it online works, which we never had before. So it was an education. So yeah, it's the best. It's the best we got. But I miss stand up so much. I cannot wait. I'll even get COVID just for the sake I can actually just perform 5 minutes on a street corner somewhere. I'd risk it. I'd risk it just to hear the laughter.
Yeah, it sounds extreme to get COVID to go into a hospital to do like hospital shows with
I think
other
you've hit
COVID
it.
patients. Yeah,
You've hit
maybe.
it there.
So I
Go
don't
to
think it's worth the
hospital.
risk. Hospital COVID tour of hospitals. All right. Well,
Me and Robyn.
Well,
Robyn
I'm not getting COVID for
she's
that.
not going to get no.
Don't drag me into
No,
this.
yeah.
She doesn't miss stand up as much as I do.
Oh, I miss stand-up. I was like a 10 gigs a week kind of girl.
Well, as much as I appreciate the stretching of an idea and COVID comedy, go for it. I think to the point, and you both demonstrated that you are stretching your mind. You are stretching what you do. Your artists are now learning tech skills, and a lot of this tech stuff, as you know, has been out in the market for years and years. You know, Zoom has existed, all this telephony stuff has existed, and theater in general. I know there's been like the Ice House here in LA was videoing live shows. Acme was doing it all the time. And a lot of people kind of poo-pooed it. It was like, you know, it's not the same thing for all the reasons you're bringing up. But now it really has stretched it. And it seems to be that there is some good and bad in all of that. And then for viewers, people who are stand-up comics, maybe early in their career, I mean, think about starting stand-up comedy in March. Yeah. And like, well, here you go. But at the same time, and we'll talk more about this, there's a lot of great stuff that's come out in terms of expanded audience and connections and all of that. So getting more into what you did with your shows, and talking about kind of the challenges, what were some of those specific challenges? You mentioned some of them. And let's feel free to keep this open. For example, let me start it. And actually, this is something that came out from someone. How did you combat those distractions? So one of the things you brought up, Jay, and I'm sure you saw it too, Robyn, is people out there talking and distracting. How do you use Zoom open?
Even our show on Tuesday, and I didn't hear this because I'm lucky enough that my girlfriend's a tech and we have this whole setup, and so I couldn't hear it at the time. But on Tuesday, we had somebody burping into the Zoom call the entire show. And the thing is, what I will say is, Jay, I don't know. So on my Zoom calls, we usually we give people the option to have the video on, but also the audio on. So you do get laughter, like immediate laughter. And of course, like when you're used to hearing 250 people laughing, 300 people laughing, it's not the same as, 20 people in a Zoom call. But when it's gone, you're like, I don't care if it's one. So I do encourage people to keep their mics on. But yeah, I had no idea. And then we got like a review being like, the show was brilliant, but like, who the fuck burps that much? It was, I don't know. Yeah.
How do you deal with that? Yeah. Okay.
Look, I'm not trying. This isn't a top trumps game, but I had one thing that just beat that. We didn't have someone burping, but like comedians swear, and like there are people watching these sorts of shows with their kids, and they didn't plug in their headsets. And I was doing a graduation show, and someone shouted out the word "fuck," right? And then all you could hear was a little baby tiny voice just going, "Mummy, what does fuck mean?" And it was audible to everybody. And to be honest, that was the best punchline we could have ever had, but the most traumatic that parent has ever gone through. Now, normally we're at a live gig. If there's a child in the audience, every comedian like seizes up and goes, "Uh-oh, I can't say certain things." But on a Zoom gig, like, let's go for it. No, it's now down to personal responsibility. And I think this is the one thing that I now bring this into my stand-up whenever I'm doing Zoom gigs is like, look, take responsibility, because we're going to just not care. We will just go for it. If you're going to burp, trust me, I'm going to burp right back at you. Okay. And I'm my own bouncer. I can mute you straight away.
Right,
I can
right.
do stuff.
But at the same time, I don't know. Like, I find that it's more personal because emceeing, like back when we started, we were also just doing straight up stand-up shows. And so I'm, you know, doing the same kind of thing, audience interaction, talking to them. And in a club, like Saturday night, if I am talking to somebody in the front row and I'm like, are you single? Doesn't matter. And then all of a sudden I did that to somebody on Zoom and it just felt insanely personal.
Yeah.
Like it felt like, so I just feel like things like swearing or getting intimate or asking those questions, because you're so there, that it actually has made me pull back more than a normal, than a live gig.
I totally agree. I totally agree. It's the buzz of live comedy and the fact that an audience will know when they go to a gig that this is the setup, and you will be spoken to by a comedian, and you know there will be jokes and they'll be free flowing, and it's a symbiotic relationship that you have as an audience and as a performer. But on Zoom, that has changed. That is one of the major things. Heckling does still happen, but they actually have to put it into words and stick it in the little chat box on the side of the thing now, and it's not the same. It's like, well, grammatically you spelt fuckhead wrong. All right, I get that. All right, maybe go to school a lot more. I don't know, but like that has changed. That is a dynamic of stand-up that has changed quite a bit, and comedians who could just do their material straight, their timing is slightly knocked out, but they can do that. But if you're relying on audience responses to certain things, that's a whole thing that's just changed. And to adapt to this kind of void of noise, as it were, or that void of a connection, is a very difficult thing. And it took me a few months before I could go, I can't rely on these same instincts as I used to as a live performer.
I know. I did an Instagram live gig where like the internet was cutting out because obviously it's on my phone, so I'm not plugged into the wall. And the entire set that I did, I had no idea if they could hear me or if I was frozen. No idea. And so I was just like, I'm gonna keep talking. No idea. Still, no.
I think this is also one of the other things when Zoom gigs first started to become a thing after lockdown, and people logged on to watching these sorts of Zoom gigs. For me, I genuinely sat there and thought, like, I'm watching some of the best comedians and their pants on Zoom, because it's not the same dynamic. And I think a lot of stand-up Zoom gigs got affected by that, where people kind of go, well, it's not the same thing, is it? Clearly it's not the same thing, it's going to be rubbish, and so on and so forth. And it went down. But I think now comedians have suddenly gone, well, we have nothing else now, so let's make the most of it. And I've started to notice comedians get better at these sorts of things. There's still a bit of a way to go. It's a new thing. Remember, this isn't as much as they had, you know, Zoom calls and you know, online streaming type of things before. People had a choice. We don't have a choice now. So henceforth, people are just adapting to it.
Well, and if I can add into that, because it's come up in other shows, you bring up a good point. There's the adaptation that you as the artist need to go through, and the hecklers and the side comments can be useful material, can be little gems. They can be brought up in reviews. But also the audience is learning about this, that there is, how are you instruct, you know, some of the theaters, especially immersive shows and all that, there's a real load-in process of training the audience what to do, and mute your mic, and this will happen and that will happen. Like you said, we're used to the rituals and the relationship prior to all this. You come in at 8 o'clock, you sit down, you have your program, you're quiet, unless you're at a comedy show, then you're heckling. There's an education going on with the artist and the audience, developing something that's new and different and unique. And then that's kind of extended. It sounds like you guys are both getting that kind of, you're adjusting. And would you say the audience and all that's happening? Yeah, Jay.
I just want to say one quick story. Sorry, Robyn. I just want to tell one quick story of my first Zoom gig. I effectively died on my hole. Okay. And the reason being is it was my first Zoom gig. I wasn't used to this as an environment, and you can't hear anybody. So I just did my set, and I was headlining this gig, right? And the first act was a freestyle rapper. The second guy was a magician, and the third guy was me. All right. Now, the freestyle rapper, you have these little chat things on the side of these Zoom calls and screens. So he just basically asked everyone to type in a word, and he would just rap and he would incorporate all these words. Guy was amazing. I thought, wow, he's used that little chat thing, and he's really got it. The magician, he then got people in the audience to type in what they thought of a card and all these other things, and type in, all these various instructions, and he really got the audience going. Tons and tons of things, right? Now, this is my first ever Zoom gig. I didn't do any of that.
Right.
I just started my material, and I thought I'll just look at the little chat box. I think I got ha 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 once. All right? Now, to a comedian, that's like a death. There's like one person laughing, and I could see the number of people that were on the Zoom call. There were like about 40 people. One person typed in ha ha ha. That's it. And I think that was the guy who booked me. All right. So so it was a terrible gig. But from that gig onwards, what I learned is like use the technology, use the little chat rooms, and get people to engage with the show and be immersed in it, and treat it just like a regular comedy club, but you have to type shit out. But I died on my whole. I can say that now. Because the money's cleared the bank. The money's cleared the bank. So I can say that.
Yeah, and you were learning. It was the first show. And it brings up a point. And Robyn, I think you have a clip showing, but one of the things that you're bringing up is this interaction. And you've got the chat room and all that, but the live laughter is just, you need that. It's your breath of fresh air, and having that back and forth. It's good to experiment with the new chat room, but you've done some stuff, and I know some other comedians have been experimenting with having the mics on, getting a little feedback. And you have a clip for us that kind of shows us a little bit of your online work, an example.
Is that working? I will push play.
It's working. I'm going to bring it up, and let's let it play, and then you'll notice, and you get some cutback scenes here with the audience. So this is a standard Zoom where you're performing, but you're not webinaring it, right? That you get to see all the buddies. So here's using Zoom. How do you get that connection? I'm going to bring this up now.
Oh, should I restart it?
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Here, we'll start it from the beginning. There we go.
This is about risk taking. Now, evaluating risk is about making a decision, right? So every time you make a decision, there are two parts of your brain, okay? You have the prefrontal cortex and you have the amygdala, right? I don't know if you guys can see this. This is the brain, right? You have the prefrontal cortex and you have the amygdala, right? Right here. This is a closer up brain, right? Prefrontal cortex, amygdala. Right, and the two work together. Now, the prefrontal cortex, that's like the factual, mathematical part of your brain, right? The logical part. Now, the amygdala, that's the emotional part of your brain. That's like the sexy bit. It does all the love and the fear and that part of your brain. And the two work together. They're very much like a Miranda and the Samantha of your brain. All right, very much like a Carlton and the Fresh Prince. It's like a Hardy and a Laurel. It's like a mullet, right? Business up front, Hardy in the amygdala. And I love the amygdala. I know I've told you guys before, but I love the amygdala. We won't get into it if we don't have time. I'm just saying, it's responsible for so many things and it doesn't get credit. Love. Screw your heart. It's your amygdala. Anyway. But the two do have a very good relationship. Like, for example, the amygdala is all like, oh, I want that jacket. And the prefrontal cortex is like, put it back. We don't have a job. Unfortunately, my girlfriend agrees with my prefrontal cortex. So both bits weigh into your risk evaluation, right? It's not just mathematical. All right, and I'm gonna give you another scenario. Okay, so we'll just say that it's like 2019. Okay, so you can do things like leave your house and not die. Okay, so say you're going on holiday, you're going on vacation. All right. Now, if you, how many of you, I just want to launch this poll, how many of you would pick a less famous airline if it would save you 150 pounds? Right off the bat, we're at, I mean, more people than are competitive. We're at about 90%. Okay, fair enough. All right. Okay, so similarly, how many of you guys would still pick that airline if it was Malaysian Airlines? All right, you know, Malaysian, yeah, okay, wow, okay, now we're more like a 50-50. Oh, no, hell no, it's actually, all right. See, that's the thing, is that's your amygdala setting in, right? Because your prefrontal cortex is going, hey, that sounds like a good deal. And your amygdala is going, how do you lose a fucking plane? That's how the two work together, right? But riskiness, because riskiness isn't just about the maths alone, right? There are other factors like the amount of risk and reward, frequency of the competition, right? They've shown that actually Olympic athletes take less risks because the Olympics are once every 4 years, right? Think about it. It's the same reason. It's the same concept of why we buy dozens of Cadbury cream eggs, because they only come every Easter. Think about it. Honestly, I think Bounty should just lock onto a holiday. Really sell them, right? It's also why stag and hen dudes get so obscenely drunk, right? Because they're like, this is never gonna happen again. Oh my God, freedom is gone forever, until Tuesday when Dave asks you out for work drinks, right? Because marriage isn't a prison. It's the same concept. Right?
All right, so that is that was my
That's great. Well, first, very funny stuff. I love science. I love it's lacking here, so it's great to see it up and in hearing it. And you really did. I mean, you got to hear Jay and I laughing as well. But we kind of fit in. This StreamYard fits nice in with Zoom on it. We feel like we're at the show. You did get that sense of humor. You had the interaction, like. You got an element that it would be harder in a live show, like so. You're playing with it, and it must be rewarding because in a dark bar, you're not seeing the person in the way back smiling at your bit. Here, you really get to see the good, bad, and ugly, but all of it. Like they're loving it.
Oh, you can see, because the thing is, I know, as you know, this attention span on Zoom gigs or online gigs is a lot shorter. Whereas, comedy night, you have 2+ hours. And I know in the States, you guys don't take intervals either. You just go straight through.
Right.
And online, much shorter attention span. And so as you're doing the jokes, I mean, of course, you see the good, and it's great when people are engaged, but then you also see the person kind of go, oh, well, that. You're like, all right, well, guess what? But
the guy in the top left, he was just like,
somebody just got a text message,
laughing right the way through, and then like one of your best jokes.
Yep. So you can tell you're a comedian, Jay, for pointing that out. So, but one of the things that I've done is, again, try to keep that engagement. So when I was asking the question, what was happening on Zoom, is there's a poll that you can put out, so everybody watching can answer the poll live.
Right.
So you're getting live feedback, and so when I did the whole airline thing, people were actually clicking, and so that kind of engagement keeps people there and involved, because I mean, it's not like people can't pay attention for an hour, but at the same time, it's a different beast. So
and that's also a thing. It's almost like an hour tops, because attention spans are quite short. Live comedy clubs like 2.5 hours, even like in the States there's no breaks or whatever. People can wander in and wander out, but they'll usually spend a good hour and a half, 2 hours at the gig anyway. But online, hour max. Anything that's over an hour, audiences just start to wane off and like, I'll make myself a coffee. Whereas at a live gig, it's the atmosphere, it's the adrenaline that's pumping around, and that is somewhat missing. And to recreate that at home is a very different beast. But that was awesome.
That's great. And I love you. I got to ask, technically, Were there 2 cameras in your space? Were you switching between 2 cameras?
Yes.
Wow.
So
Wow.
I know. As I mentioned earlier, my girlfriend is a tech. I'm very, I know. There's 2
Yay, Caitlin!
I know. It is like some people are like, fair play to anybody who married a hairdresser. If you're a comedian, fair play if you married a tech.
My
I
wife's
really-
an accountant.
I know.
That's all I got. That's all I got.
I know. You can't even use your accountant to like claim for the government grant. You got to do that on your own. Anyway,
I got furloughed, so it was cool.
I don't have a
Right.
but I know. The thing is that so as I mentioned, I got back March 8th. We moved in together 3 days before lockdown.
Wow.
And it wasn't like we had agreed on a place 3 days before, like, but not like it wasn't because lockdown was happening. We just got insanely lucky.
Yeah.
Wow.
Insanely lucky. We got our Wi-Fi installed 3 hours before lockdown.
Wow.
Yeah, like the
Wow.
guy came the afternoon. They announced it Monday night. The guy came Monday afternoon. Yeah, it was.
Wow.
Oh, this would have been a different lockdown.
Oh, wow.
Also, we're in a basement flat, so I don't even have service. So I mean, like, cool. But in any case, so I've got the girlfriend that's doing all the tech. So what happens? I do have 2 cameras because as you can see when I flip to the brain, the camera on my laptop is not great at all.
Right.
And so I have I have an iPhone, like one of the ones with like that, but with like the good camera. So I have that set up right behind my screen. But you can see on that one and the other clip that I have, I'm getting better at looking at that camera because as you could see the other camera, it's very much above me. And because I'm like, I have notes because I'm writing a new 20 minutes every week, which as a comic, you can't memorize that like and do it well, you know? So I've got like 2 screens. So that's why I have one of them is a lot better resolution. And
Interesting.
yeah, because it's also what you can afford. So you can get a webcam and it's super expensive, but I mean, even one at like £100 is still not going to be that good.
Yeah.
So it's so the 2 camera thing
Okay.
does, and then
Oh, sorry.
No, I was just going to say, and then I combine them afterwards in a editing program. So you just align the audio and then flip between the 2.
So that's another follow-up. So you do it live, and then you re-edit it before you post it out?
Yeah. So, and the thing is, as I've mentioned a bit, and I think somebody had asked in the question, have your jokes changed? Has writing been harder? And I'll just answer that at the same time. But when it's lockdown, I thought that's what we're supposed to be doing, right?
Yeah, this is good. You guys go. I love it.
Give me an hour and a half. Let's do this. Anyway, so I found it really hard to just work on the show that was supposed to be for Edinburgh 2020 when we went into lockdown. So I started these shows because the way that the chat show works is I do like an opening. It's almost like a late night American TV show where I'll do 10 to 20 minutes at the top. Then I have a non-science comedian come on, do a set about the same topic, but not from a science point of view. And then we have a chat about it. And so I very much let the guests pick the topic. So I'm like, oh, you have material on competitiveness. Okay. And then I go and do the scientific research behind it, write jokes on it, and then present it. So it's a crap load of work. But the point behind that being I've been doing these shows every week. And so I just don't physically have time to edit them. So I've put out a few of them unlisted, but there's also, I have to make sure I have agreements from all the people on Zoom to like get their photo out there. Right. And I have to also make sure comedians are okay with it, or if I have to edit out the stand up and only have the chat in there. And on top of that, again, so the Tuesday shows up until this point have all been the first time I'm doing the material, which again, as a comedian, I mean, I usually do material 50 times before I call it not new. So what I'm doing for the next few shows, like on Sunday, which is the Laughing Horse one, and I have another one on the 23rd, another one at the end of the month, I'm repeating topics. And so and then taking some time where I'm actually going to be able to get the better footage, refined material, and then put it out as a thing that is more polished.
Oh,
So,
well, good chunks of knowledge there about the whole live versus editing, new material getting up there, partner up with someone who has a tech background. Definitely, and get the good internet. That's all wonderful. And a lot of points also, taking that and then applying it to, Jay, what you had to go through with teaching classes, because there's similar things like the students, what if they don't have a webcam? How did is there a training process to get them online to do it? How did they take to you not being there, giving the live in-person stuff? How did that work for you?
Sure. I mean, kudos to Robyn. If ever there was a conspiracy theory that Robyn started coronavirus, is that she got a tech friend. She's a stand-up comic, and she got cameras and shit, and she moved in and had decent Wi-Fi.
By the way, Jay, we did cover conspiracy theories in an earlier show.
Show number 1, conspiracy theories.
Right.
The clues were there. That's all I'm saying.
The neuroscience behind it is fascinating.
Yeah, I bet.
But like in terms of teaching the courses, Zoom is free software that people can kind of download on a laptop. The very first course that we had, we publicized that people download the Zoom app and all this kind of stuff, and they did it. And what I was more apprehensive and worried about is doing the courses sort of like straight to camera means that I'm limited. There are certain things that I kind of do on the live course where I kind of move around and I kind of, and there's an energy about the place, which I was more scared of, that the energy may not translate to people sitting at home, clicking onto a Zoom link to learn about comedy. But I think the one thing that I can take away from it is that there's a motivation there. From people who want to kind of do these things online, there's a motivation for them to want to learn about stand-up comedy. So that part is there. Now, similarly to a comedy club, there's a motivation for an audience who've come to a comedy club to watch a show. And henceforth, if that motivation is somewhat like distracted by being at home or having other things going on, or not really concentrating on a 10x4 screen or whatever it is, it can really affect the actual dynamic of the show. But in terms of the courses, people had a motivation to be there in the first place. So henceforth, technically everything worked. They could see me. I had to modify certain parts of the course, and I actually started talking about doing online shows and doing gigs online and teaching that as a module for the course. Which the whole thing that I talk about in terms of comedy is you can read books and books and books about stand-up comedy, and they're all rubbish. Every single book you've ever read about stand-up comedy is absolute, total, and utter garbage. They talk about rules that are over 100 years old. That comedy has evolved. We do not think that way. And when I kind of teach what I teach people that sort of like the most important thing in comedy is connection with the audience. Now, live, you can read a room, you can sit there, you can look at their faces, you can figure everything out, you can hear what they're laughing at and what they're not laughing at, you can figure out sensibilities in the room, you can figure all this stuff out. But online, wow, how are you going to do that to just a bunch of like muted videoless squares on the screen? And it's a lot harder. So this is where the other parts of the discipline of comedy, which is your editing and your timing and your material, is what really has to now come into the forefront, and being able to deliver it. And certainly with the landscape we've got now of just online Zoom gigs, a lot of my students, and there are tons and tons of gigs, and in fact there are many US open mic-y gigs that are out there that people kind of click on and sign up and do their material to, and that's the level of experience that they've got. But I've noticed that from students that I've kind of supported and seen, they've got better and better and better at delivery, and being able to really like hone in and be able to deliver a line and get get it to work online. So when
Really?
live comedy starts to come up, a lot of their kind of ability to be able to deliver material is kind of come from doing these kind of open mic gigs. The only thing that they haven't really learned is reading an audience and understanding it, which is essentially what you know they'll develop and learn, but it goes in hand with being able to deliver a joke. So they'll read a room and they'll start to get there. So that's the only element of stand-up that's a lot harder. It's not impossible, but it's a lot harder to read. And delivery and editing and all that stuff still remains the same. So the discipline of stand-up is still the same. It's just a whole different platform that we deliver on, and henceforth that's the level of adaptation that comedians have to go through at the moment. But in terms of how comedians are progressing, there are tons and tons of gigs, and they do really, really well. And audience feedback from just chat boxes and emails and all this kind of stuff, and even watching people laughing on screen, people are kind of going, I understand the limitations of this and I'll go with it. So it's a bit of an all good old British spirit there. I'm saying that I'm an Asian guy and there's two Americans and I'm the most British. That's all I'm saying.
Fair. New world. I love it. It's great.
Hey, all I care about is a technicality right now. Okay.
Conspiracy theory right there.
Well, and it is, again, going back, the audience is learning, the audience accepts it. And it is great to hear. It seems very a positive that, and I take it these people are taking classes, they're new to comedy in general. Absolutely. So these aren't necessarily, I don't know if there's classes where veteran comics are learning how to act in Zoom. They're just going out and doing their shows in front of all these gigs and are kind of learning as they do it. Or is there like 101 for the seasoned stand-up on how to act online?
It's a new thing.
No. I mean, it seems like you've got a playground. Everybody understands that you're going to be different than when you were on stage. Let's see what you got. But for the newbies, you're finding that this isn't wasted time. They should sign up for your class and start training, because there's going to be some nuts that come out of this. I was talking to Patrick Bristow, who's a big comedy actor here, and he's moved online. And he said the one thing he's really bringing up is the importance of listening, which has always been a big rule of his for improv. And so he is centering on that. He is really centering on listening, different muscles to stand up. But you are finding, Jay, in teaching that there is stuff they can get out of this.
Oh, absolutely. The discipline of stand-up hasn't changed. The discipline of stand-up, any professional comic, and I literally mean any professional comic, and I mean any professional comic, all right? It's not by luck that professional comics are funny. It is not by luck. The only difference is when you're a newbie and you're starting out and you're doing it, if you learn that as a discipline, stand-up will kind of, you'll understand how all the professional comics do it, be it by just being able to watch them go, oh, that's how Bill Hicks did it. Oh, that's how Michael McIntyre does it. Oh, that's how this guy does it. I understand all of this. And the discipline is still the same. When live comedy does open back up, the discipline will literally just come straight back. The one thing about comedians is it's a very grounded art form, because ultimately your living is based on laughter, and you have to be good at what you do to evoke that laughter. So you're very grounded in what you do as a comedian. So henceforth, you're always playing for laughter. You're always trying to figure out the audience. You're always trying to do all of these things. Now, learning things online, the discipline is exactly the same, but it's still new. There's still lots of different caveats. And indeed, I even saw Terry Alderton, a very, very, very well-known comic here in the UK. He's a very, very good comic. And I saw him on one of these kind of compilation shows, and he used the technology beautifully. He was talking about his family and so on and so forth. And there was a green screen at the back. And it just basically showed, he was, oh, this is my nan, this, that, and the other. And basically, she tripped over, and they have a big family dog who started humping her. and he completely ignored the dog humping her, but everyone can see it as a medium. So visually, there's a punchline right there, as well as him talking through the whole thing. And he knows it inside out, outside in. It is not by luck that professional comics are funny, but they can now start to use all these different green screens and different things to do to execute even more laughter. It's an amazing thing. It's an amazing thing.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not in front of a green screen now. This is like the setup that I use for my comedy show.
That's really where you live.
Okay, guys.
Hey, I'm in a mental institute right now. Look at the white wall.
It's where you belong. So
I haven't even got a laptop. I'm just. You're all in my mind. The amygdala. I learned something. The amygdala. You're in my amygdala.
When I'm doing like the sciencey stuff, I'll use a backdrop, images of backdrop for my, like, instead of a slide projector. So like coming up with creative ways to actually use visuals to help.
Yeah, and if I could jump in, because I mean, you showed that in that clip, Robyn, which was great. And I've got a question actually from our monitor and helper on the show. Miles Berman has a great question related to this. Do you think normal stand-up will be different when we are able to leave our homes again? And I would say, how is all this stuff, the new use of technology, is that going to affect your live show? Is you have a new format because you do this talk show format? Jay, are you still going to do some of this online stuff because there are certain muscles you can flex, and quite frankly, you can get students from all over the world? Like, what's going to be different? What's going to be the same? What do you think? And we're guessing here, but who knows?
I mean, yeah,
sure, go
ahead.
It's what I was going to say.
Two stand-ups walk into a bar and ask for a drink.
Go ahead, Jay.
All I was going to say was, but the whole thing about doing these courses online, there's a whole load of advantages. We're not bound by a venue. We're not bound by a landlord of a bar or a theatre space that suddenly go bankrupt in the middle of Christmas, and then suddenly we're all tapped out on the street, but we booked 6 weeks in, or anything like that. We've got this flexibility of just doing this online and doing it from anywhere. No one has to ever leave their home or put themselves into danger by traveling on the tube or on the subway or whatever you guys call it. But there's a whole load of advantages to all of this. So I teach a beginners and an intermediate and an advanced course. Now, previously, the intermediate and the advanced course, we used to have limited numbers on it because the amount of exercises and techniques I go through just wouldn't be possible with 30 students. But we can do this online, and we can run even more of these courses, and so on and so forth. So the whole intermediate and the advanced courses will just permanently move online. The beginners courses, there'll always be an online element. So there'll be live courses as well, because people prefer live, but the online courses can appeal to a lot more people, and then have a live graduation show, so they can learn all of the stuff and then still be able to perform live.
Absolutely. I think that's the strength of it, and that's the growth from it. Robyn, how about for a live show? How do you see this changing?
I mean, I think that I don't, when we actually are able to be out in the public again, at a close proximity, like, I think it will go back to the same type of delivery. I think that it's going to take some time for people to write something other than COVID jokes, because I think I am, even on the Zoom calls, audience are like, I don't care that you've been in your living room. I have to. Let's talk about something else. But I think what's going to be really interesting is on a few different levels. First of all, that transition between what is when we were all locked up and we had to be online, that's all we had, and with we're able to be in the public, like, nobody's denying that watching something live has an energy that you can't get online. And geographically, you have a huge advantage when you are online, because you can access people that you wouldn't have access to. For example, this conversation, I don't think that your budget would fly us over there for an hour long chat.
Exactly.
But at the same time, that live interaction, that energy is something that can't be replicated. In the in between, when you can have like half capacity or like there's outdoor gigs, I think that's going to be the most different, because people would prefer out at like live, but yet like online is going to struggle because there's a little bit of online, but or live, but it's not the same. So I think that'll be interesting, that transition between the two. And I guess the other thing I would say is I think it has bred a lot of new ideas that will continue, which is a benefit of it. And there are different types of chat shows or podcasts or types of topics that can thrive and continue. But I think if given the option between live and online, live is going to win if it's possible.
Yeah,
absolutely. Also, was one final point, just to kind of weave in a question from earlier. Have your jokes changed, and has writing been harder? The one thing I will say is comedians, you know, they can write a killer club set and use the same set over and over again for like decades. I've been guilty of it. All right. But the thing is now after this, I love stand-up so much that I'm almost genuinely willing to just junk all of my 20-minute set that I've written. And over the course of this 4.5 month, 5 month lockdown, written a whole load of new stuff. And some of the online gigs I've done, I only used maybe 1 minute of any of my old material and a whole load of new stuff, which I would always be frightened of. So it's kind of got me back into the love affair of doing stand-up again. And writing comedy and so on and so forth, because I can't do the same jokes, 2 months after lockdown, and it's like, hold on, that reference is a bit old now, and there's did you not see all of this lockdown that happened in the middle of it all, and the way how the world has changed? So stand-up has to be reflective of that. So in the fact that it's pushed me to write more material and look at things and be back to that kind of young kid with the black hair when he first started doing stand-up. You see how this all went circle.
Very
back to
well
the black
done.
hair. Starting the show with my black hair and ending it with my black hair again. And down there as well. And down there.
Well, and I tossed in there too, I don't know how much of it was in the UK. It was very big here in LA. The Black Lives Matter movement. That also has had a big impact on shows, material, and should I say this? And I should say this. So I think there was a change. We're still in the middle of it, so we're tired of the mute jokes. We get it. Your mute's not on, and now it's on, and that's funny. We have to kind of expand from that. But that's what you guys are doing. That's why Yeah.
And actually on that, I'm very, not to like blatantly plug, but on Tuesday, I have the show is Why Do We Hate is the question that we're answering on the science show. And I have,
cool.
I have Dane Baptiste, who is amazing. And he's been like a really big profile in the Black Lives Matter movement in the UK as well. So it's got to be relevant to what's going on.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, it does. Relevancy, the fact now it's been brought up that now, and this is probably more so in theater than stand-up comedy, where people throw, a 5 or 10 or 20 or, buy a few drinks. It's a great equalizer where anybody can come jump in and see a show for a cheap price and put up a show. Like you don't care if the comedy club down the block is going to give you a 5-minute set. You can go ahead. I mean, nobody may come. It may just be your family. But you are able to go ahead and put it up. And that's exciting. What other, in that vein, are you finding, like, I'm getting this international, I think you mentioned a little bit of that in terms of, or maybe I'm COVID braining with other conversations. So excuse me. But in terms of the perks, like, are you getting press? Like I have a friend who's doing Edinburgh Fringe, and the Scotsman is going to review his show, even though he's in New York City. Like, audience coming to see it. Have you seen any of that? Is there perks of that you like from this?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, I have an article in 3 Weeks magazine that just came out about the Edinburgh Fringe show that I'm doing. But there's like small things like that. There's been like a few online pressy type things, but it's and a Guardian article about it as well. But
Nice.
there's a lot of stuff online right now. Is the other problem?
That is the other side.
Yeah. And I think that kind of tying back to how it's going to change, it also, there's a striation in the market right now. And because you can watch anybody in the world, it kind of, it's separating it so that the most famous people are getting the majority of the audience, because you no longer need to just go within a 10-minute walk of your house when you can log on and see Michael McIntyre at the same place, regardless of where he is. So that's tough.
Yeah. I mean, in terms of me, in terms of press and stuff, there's been a lot more interest in terms of the courses. Whereas because it's gone online, there's a website that's wanting to promote a taster version of all of the courses. So if people are interested, you're more than welcome to kind of go on that. I think you've got the link. You can put that up a little bit later. It's on Culture Trip, but they're like little two and a half hour versions of the course, little taster sessions that kind of give you a good idea. So people are aware of a lot more online stuff and are pushing it. I've done a couple of articles now where they've been talking about not only just online stand-up gigs, but also certainly the impact of people wanting to learn more online. Considering the fact that a lot of people are being laid off and the unemployment's going to shoot through the roof over the next 6 months or so, a lot of people have time on their hands to go and learn a whole new thing. And
honestly, I did a personal training course for like 10 quid online. It was I mean,
Groupon's fantastic, isn't it? Groupon is fantastic.
I do. I run a Zoom workout every day with my family and friends at 12:30.
I love it.
I got a beginner's lobotomy class on Groupon. It was like £15. It was amazing, and it comes with a free mug as well, a free glass jar and everything. It was really good. Groupon's brilliant.
All of that. There are those opportunities, and I kind of push people there. Both of you guys have shows, you've got classes. I want to put up some websites. First off, all those articles you have, please send them to me. And everybody out there, I'm going to post those articles. I'm going to post the websites, more information so you can see both of these wonderful guests live on stage, maybe book some workshop classes with Jay. So Jay, for that, they're going to go to Laughing Horse Comedy. .co.uk right down there. Also Laughing Horse, Mr. Alex Petty was on one of our earlier shows. They are running their version of the free Edinburgh Fringe online as we speak. I think it's about 8 o'clock there. Isn't there a show tonight? Maybe. I think things are happening as we speak. So check that out for the rest of the month. And then Robyn, you've got some upcoming shows. Robyn has some additional links I'll share later with some more specifics, but some of her clips, some of her shows, and all that great information. Well, again, thank you. I want to keep to the hour because as we've discussed, that hour is the sweet spot.
1 hour.
1 hour. So, but seriously, thank you guys so much. This was such a treat. Thank you for sharing. And most important, with everybody I talk to, I'm always like, seriously, without being like that host guy, thank you for doing this. I mean, not only being on the show, but like still venturing. This is terrible times. People are like being devastated. And you decided like, learn tech and get your partner to help you out with tech. And you're doing classes in a mental institution.
Yeah.
Just had to check a text there. Just had
check the text, yes. And you're putting up with that. You're putting up with all of it and still going through it. And that's commendable. So thank you. Again, we are going to meet up for a drink. Alex Petty has mentioned he's buying everybody drinks from the show in Edinburgh next year at the Free Sisters when we come back. So I'm going to add you guys onto the list. I do look forward to seeing you in real times.
Bless you, my friend.
And thank you, both of you, for coming out here and joining this.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Take care.
You too. And the technical part is always that final fun thing. Thank you, guys.